Hi and welcome to this session on campaign response best practice. I'm Steve Harlow and I joined SoPro back in 2015, and in that time I've seen us grow from a team of just 4 to where we are today with over 100 people in the business. A huge part of that growth is down to some of the tips I'll be sharing with you today, so let's have a quick look at what we'll be covering. First up, we'll be looking at why a response is useful. Then we'll be discussing how to categorize and handle our replies. We'll discuss the importance of chasers, effective CRM management, a speedy response, before ending on Steve's top tips. So let's dive in. It's really important to make sure all responses are categorized. Without knowing what type of replies you are getting back from the people you are contacting, you're not able to establish whether you are generating a lot of interest, not very much interest, but also what kind of interest you are receiving. Are lots of people keen to speak now? Are they looking to speak in the future? Are you contacting the wrong department in the business and continually being pointed in another direction? Are you getting lots of people right back to you, but nobody actually wanting to speak? Until you categorize your responses and have a clear breakdown of what people are saying to you, you cannot make effective choices in how to change your approach and how to evolve the messaging out to those people. So it's really important to make sure that every response that comes through is read thoroughly by a person and put into the correct category, and that will allow you to have a clear picture of what people are saying to you and what, if any, changes you may need to make to either your messaging or your targeting, and overall it gives you a very good picture of whether your campaign or your activity is performing well. What I'm now going to be going through is a guide to dealing with different types of replies that come from any outbound emailing activity, and we put them into 4 main categories. You've got your declines, or we call them polite declines. They're not always polite, but they're decline nonetheless. You've got a positive response, deferred interest, and a referral. So let's look at those in a bit more detail. Firstly, I want to take a step back and look at the reasons why you may not get a reply to your email in the first place. And there's many reasons why this may happen, from somebody is not interested, perhaps they missed the email, they didn't read it all the way through, so didn't really get to the point of understanding whether they're interested or not. Thought, I'll deal with that later. We're all guilty of that. Too busy. Could simply be that they're in a bad mood that day. They didn't feel you tried hard enough. Maybe they're not sure that your approach is genuine. All those reasons could also apply to why somebody may respond to you saying they're not interested. It may be not that they genuinely don't think you can help them or they're not interested, but you've just caught them at the wrong time, you've caught them in a bad mood. So it's not always the end of the road when somebody says to you, no thank you. Looking at the declines that we typically receive, I put them into 4 main categories. You've got a short rejection, a longer rejection, a misunderstanding rejection, where they haven't quite grasped exactly what you're trying to speak to them around, so therefore they think they're not interested. And then the last one, the we don't need you, which we know that hurts a little bit, but if people feel that they can effectively do what you do internally, then perhaps they don't need the external help of what it is you're offering. So here's some examples of how to respond to these types of decline. The short rejection. This is where you're not really given anything to work with. A simple no thank you. They've not given you anything to work with in terms of overcoming any sort of objection. It is worth giving it a soft second stab though. So the first thing you need to do is acknowledge that they're saying they're not interested, maybe give them a little bit more information, and then again just finish off with I understand you're not interested right now, but if in the future you do feel maybe we could be of assistance, we do hope you think of us. So here's an example of what we may use on the screen now, but the key thing is to not tell them that they should be interested, but acknowledge that they're not, feed them more information that you feel may change their mind, and then hope for the best in the future. If we look back as to why people may not reply to us, one of them being they don't think you've tried hard enough, by replying with this sort of email, it may sway them into feeling that you deserve a chance to explain your service, your product, and how you can help them. We call it the good sport approach. It's nice and harmless, but friendly. The long rejection. This is when you get a response with an explanation as to why that company or the person is not interested in your approach, which is good because it gives you something you can work with in terms of acknowledging their objection and working to overcome it. Not every objection is overcomable. For example, if somebody says to you, "We have no money," it's likely they cannot become a customer. When handling any objection, there are three main steps: empathy, benefit, and close. Empathy is to acknowledge and understand their objection. A benefit is to give them another way of looking at it, to suggest that perhaps you could help in this area. And then a close is to almost assume you have convinced the person that they should be interested and suggest that it would be good to speak. Not in a rude way, but if you leave it open-ended, there's a chance that they may just move on and not pay attention to your objection. So at that point, the benefit you have put forward, you've lost the attention you've got from them. So you see an example here where somebody has come back and said, not interested to SoPro because they have had a bad experience with a different lead gen company or another lead generation service. So I want to explain that I appreciate you've had a bad experience. Not all companies are the same. Here's a bit of information about us, why we're good, the evidence that we are providing a very successful service and that our clients get a lot from it. And then seeing if they are open to having a conversation either this or next week. No harm in throwing a little good sport in there as well, for good measure. The misunderstanding rejection. This is where somebody replies to your email saying, "Thank you, but no thank you, because I'm not interested in," and they say they're not interested in something that isn't actually what you do, or is not quite what you offer as regards to a service or a product. When SoPro will go out to a potential prospect, we do sometimes get a reply assuming that perhaps we are a telesales service, which we are not. If that happens, I want to explain to somebody that in a polite way that we are not a telesales service, give them a little bit more information about what we do, and again, look to close them off with the suggestion of having a conversation. So it follows the same pattern of empathy, benefit, and close, but it's empathizing and explaining or re-explaining what it is you do to cover off that misunderstanding, throwing in the benefit as to why we think they should speak to us now they've got a little bit more clarity on what we do, and then closing off to get that conversation booked in. The final one, the "we do not need you" or the "we don't need you." It can hurt. You've built your business, you feel you provide a fantastic service, or you have a product that really helps your customers, and you go out to a potential business and a person and they come back explaining that it's all good, we've got that area of our business covered. Now, they may well have it covered. However, perhaps what you offer could improve how they do their lead gen, or how they currently market themselves, or how they manage the financial reports within their business. Now, whatever it is you offer, they think they've got it covered. They're responding in that way. It's still worth following up and seeing whether you can offer something to elevate what they already do. Following the same pattern here, empathy, benefit, and close. You don't want to waste their time, but give them a benefit as to why you may help them over and above what they already do, which could be time savings, it could be cost savings, but you really are keen to speak to them, even if it's just to compare what you offer to what they do currently and see whether there is any room for improvement. If not, a conversation doesn't do any harm. Again, it's all about responding to that objection, giving it another crack, and then accepting if they're still not interested, they're not interested. Now we've dealt with the declines, we can move on to the good replies. The leads where people are interested, or the company is interested to speak to you. And even though they're interested, these still require effective management. And there are the right ways to deal with a lead and the wrong ways. So here is our advice on how to take a lead response and get it booked in as a pitch, or move the conversation forward. The most popular type of lead is simply the positive response. You've emailed somebody saying, "I'd like to speak to you." They've come back and said, "I'm happy to have that conversation." At that point, there's no need for any further back and forth other than to book in when you will have that conversation or that meeting. So simply reply with, "Great, When works for you? I've got some dates and times on these days. Feel free to choose one. I can send a diary invite. And all you're looking to do is simply book them in to move the conversation from the medium of email to a verbal conversation. And that's when you can really start to understand the client's needs, what you can do to help them, and start building a rapport with that particular prospect or business. With the deferred interest, this is somebody who is interested in what you offer, but it's not quite the right timing, whether they need to delay the conversation by 2 weeks or 2 months. Either way, with deferred interest, organisation is key. First off, you want to get back to them swiftly in terms of acknowledging their response, and then you want to make sure that you put a note in your diary when to follow up with that prospect to then look to book in the conversation. If it's going to be 2 or 3 months further down the line, we would also advise booking in a midway diary invite just to send them something useful to keep you in their minds, which could be a recent blog post, it could be a white paper, a case study, just something to say, I know we're not booked in to speak until 6 weeks from now, just thought you might find this interesting in the meantime. And then when it comes around to the actual date of getting back in touch with them, it wants to be a simple approach of, I hope you're well, the classic email opener, with following up on our conversation, looking to book in the conversation, does this day, this date work for you? So fairly assumptive with that response. And often they will follow up and you'll get this booked in. It may need to be pushed on by another month, but again, you follow the same process. And if you're polite and you keep in touch with somebody, there's a very, very good chance you will end up speaking to them, and it'll be at a time that's appropriate to them. And people appreciate that. There's no point being overly pushy if people are busy. Acknowledging that will only put you in good stead when you do actually start to have a conversation with that prospect. With a referral lead, there are 2 types of response that come through. The first one is what I'd call a cold referral, where you get a response saying, you should speak to this person at this email address. They handle this at our business. When you are contacting that person, it is a little bit from cold because this will be the first time that they have heard from you. Always mention in your email, though, the person that referred you on, and make sure this is only done in a genuine fashion. I've received emails where they have claimed to have spoken to somebody else in the business in order to mislead me into having a conversation. Terrible way to start a business relationship. In this scenario, where you have actually received an email response saying, speak to this person, it's fine to mention that individual, and you may even want to CC them in. Now, the email that you send to this prospect will look very similar to your original prospecting email to the initial person that referred you, but it will have the opening line of the fact that you got referred by that person to speak to them, and then you'll suggest about having a conversation. The second type of referral is where you are looped in to that person via CC. This is slightly warmer because they have introduced you to carry on the conversation with that person, and this often happens if you contact perhaps the CEO of a company and they delegate this responsibility to one of the other directors in the business, or perhaps their co-founder. So they will CC you in and say, hey, you should speak to this person. I'll leave you to arrange a conversation. Your reply there will simply be a reply all, thanks original prospect, hi new prospect, it'd be great to set up a conversation, perhaps you're available later this week or perhaps next week. What you don't need to do is write a whole new explanation of what you're contacting them about, because the original message will be in that email chain, so the person can scroll down and see what you're trying to contact that business around. So what I've explained to you there is how to follow up or how to reply to the various types of responses. But this is a really important bit, and often the part that people forget to do, and it's chasers. Now, this is not chasing people who have declined, but any lead that comes through, you want to make sure that you put every effort into making sure that you move that response where there's interest to a conversation. And if you do this right, you should be booking in 70 to 80% of these lead responses in your diary without too much problem at all. The chaser emails that you may send will follow a very similar pattern to the type of chasers that we send when we're delivering our prospecting service. You don't want to be rude, you don't want to be aggressive, but often someone may miss an email if you don't follow up, the conversation could go cold, even though they were interested. Remember, although they may have expressed interest, you're unlikely to be in the top 10 tasks they have to do that day. They're busy running a business, so they're happy to give you the time because you've piqued their interest, but it's up to you to ensure that the conversation moves forward. The typical chaser chain that I will send once somebody has responded showing some interest, once I've sent the initial follow-up to that reply, I'll then wait and then send a quick nudge, which simply is me forwarding on the first email and saying, hey, sent you the below, just following up so we can get this booked in. If I still don't hear back, I might then send a chase with a benefit. So similar to the first one, but perhaps just reaffirm why they should be wanting to speak to you. If they don't respond after that, then it may be that they've lost interest in what you offer. And the last thing you want to do is continually chase people. Or it may be that they feel that they can deal with you later because you'll keep plugging away and keep trying to get in touch. That's when we bring in a breakup email. And a breakup email is so effective because you're letting the person know that you really want to speak to them. However, to avoid becoming a pest or a pain to them, you're not going to keep emailing them over and over again. And it lets that prospect know that if they genuinely are interested, but perhaps a little bit busy, now's the time to reply and agree to that conversation, book in that time and that call. It puts the onus back in their hands to then make the conversation happen. And believe me, by sending a polite breakup email, you will more often than not find out why that conversation hasn't been booked in yet, or it will move forward and you'll get a conversation arranged with that person. It's a very, very useful email to send, but make sure it's polite. So an example here, hi first name, last thing I want to do is become a pest, so I'll leave this with you for now. If you're still interested to hear about SoPro, then please do let me know. Over to them. With regards to the chaser emails, how often to send them, what I will often follow is a pattern of, if it's a positive response, I'll chase every 2 to 3 days. If it's following up further down the line with a deferred interest, I'll probably leave it every 4 to 5 days because it's been a while since my initial approach and I don't want to come across as aggressive. If I'm looped into somebody with a referral email, I'll typically chase again every 4 to 5 days. If it's a colder referral, then I'll move more to 5 to 6 days, similar to the pattern we follow for our standard prospecting, because you are in some way starting a bit colder, although you've got a particular reason to be contacting that individual. Of course, this is just what I do, but the main thing is that you don't want to be aggressive, but you don't want to leave it too long between the chases. So you'll find a balance between what works best for you. We've got to the stage now, we've had replies, you responded, you've convinced them that they should listen to you, or you've arranged the conversation following a lead, and it's time to take that pitch further forward. Every time that you book in a conversation with a potential prospect, you want to make sure this is logged in your sales CRM. The reason it's important to have a centralized CRM is you may organize a lot of conversations with companies, with businesses, you may have a follow-up process, and somebody else in the company, because they won't have access to your emails or your personal organization journals or your diary, they need to know any active conversations that are happening. So if you make sure that you have a centralized CRM where all conversations are logged, where you make a note of where you're up to in the pitch with that particular prospect, then not only will it keep you organized to see what's going on in your pipeline, but also it allows anybody else in the business to also have visibility. The last thing you want to do is have two people in the same business talking to a potential client, unbeknown to each other. That won't look particularly good. I would strongly advise making sure that a CRM is used to log all prospects where there's interest, make sure that all the conversations and emails are also logged in that CRM. And when it comes to adding notes about conversations you've had, do it straight away. The longer you leave it, the more blurry that conversation will become, and you may end up losing some important detail that would be useful for you to refer back to at a later date. Could be something small, like that person recently went on holiday, and you want to just remind them of that. Anyone who feels that they can hold this information in their head is probably going to be sorely disappointed. CRM management. Get one, use it, keep it up to date. Speed, speed, speed. Now, in some areas of life, speed is not a good thing. But in terms of effective response management, it is very important. If somebody receives an email from you and they take their time to respond to that email, it's impolite to leave them waiting. Now, I appreciate you may have a busy day, you may have lots going on, but as soon as you can reply to people that respond to you, you should do that as a matter of priority. If somebody replies and they're interested to speak, definitely aim to reply to them within 30 minutes. Bear in mind that at the point they reply to you, they are sat at their desk or with their laptop, or they've got their phone in their hand, so they're more likely to see a response from you if you get back to them quickly. And also, the point they reply, they've shown some interest. That interest will naturally decline over time. So the quicker you get on it, you're at the peak of the interest, you're more likely to catch them when they're already still looking at their emails, and you can move the conversation further forward. If you leave replying to the next day, you make your job of booking the conversations in much, much harder. So speed is of the essence. Be prompt with your replies. Don't keep people waiting. Hopefully you found that useful. We're going to end on my top tips in terms of not only effective response management, but also the sales process as a whole. So to recap, everyone who replies to you deserves a response back, even if it's just to acknowledge the decline or have another attempt at convincing them to speak to you. Every lead is precious, so make sure that you respond promptly and effectively to every single one and book them in for a conversation. Don't try and pitch people over email. It's much harder to build any sort of rapport, and also a conversation back and forth via email over the span of 7 days could potentially be covered off in a 20-minute phone conversation. Part of your sales process always comes down to solving a problem for the client. And if you're having a conversation, whether it's over the phone, over a coffee, in their office, over a Zoom call, over a video call, then you can get to the crux of what their problem is, see whether you can solve it, and if you can and they like what you're offering, you can move forward. So don't pitch on email, move it to a conversation. Be organised. You speak to any person in sales, admin is their least favourite task. Any business has that challenge to deal with when it comes to ensuring that the salespeople are taking care of the administrative side. If you are the person that's going to be following up with these leads, then my advice to you, admin is really important. It's a bit boring, but it really helps you further down the line. Always log your information following a conversation. Don't try and do it all at the end of the day because you won't remember everything. My final tip, and this applies to how you respond to people via email and also when you're having any verbal conversation with somebody. Don't try and hide your personality or anything that shows you are a human being. For example, maybe the background for your video call isn't perfect. However, that can open up a conversation with the person you're speaking to that isn't just about business. Don't try and make every conversation perfect because it never will be. People will ultimately buy from you if they like you. And if they think they're speaking to somebody who's just explaining something in a robotic fashion, then they're not going to warm to you and you're not going to get anywhere with that company. And if you're a service like SoPro, where we speak to our clients on a very regular basis, having a rapport with those people is so important. So don't try and be robotic, don't try and be perfect, be human. Humans are flawed, and make sure that you show your personality, because personality goes hand in hand with the product or service you offer, and one of the big reasons why people will choose you over your competitors. And believe me, you will have competitors. So thank you for listening today. Hopefully you've taken something useful from it. I wish you all a pleasant day.